Hello, I'm James Woodcock of pixelrefresh.com, and this is Game and Gadget podcast number 19, recorded live for the very first time on YouTube, on our new YouTube channel. And here with me, as per usual, is my co-host, who is also with another co-founder of Revolution Software, Mr. Tony Warriner. Welcome back, Tony. So for anyone listening in the audio podcast, that was a salute from Tony. So how's it been, Tony? How did you manage with up towards 40 degrees of heat in the UK?
Well, I mean, it wasn't too bad, actually. It was only like 2 days, wasn't it? So like 2 days, you can kind of go, oh, well, this will be funny and see how it is kind of thing. And then, back to normal after that. So I thought it was all right, actually. And they were kind of saying everyone's going to kind of die and the world's going to end and stuff. But it's only what you get when you go to Spain or something, isn't it?
Amazingly, I'd booked that week off work. And also amazingly, I decided to go shopping with my wife. So we went to Meadowhall in Sheffield, which was virtually empty, which is virtually unheard of for Meadowhall. And the air conditioning was beautiful.
All right.
So Monday, we spent the whole day there. And I'd like to say it was because of the shopping experience and the food, but really it was the air conditioning that swung it in the end.
Yeah. We've got a Tesco Express just like 150 meters away, and it's freezing in there. So that was a good place to go fairly often. Actually, we went to Booker's as well, and they have a chill room. But when we went in there and I thought, oh, this is so good. But then about literally 30 seconds later, it was just too cold. So we had to come back out again to warm up. And the chill room is like really cold. It's not freezing, but it's not far off. And it's like a fridge. It's like 2 degrees or something. It's really cold, but it's a whole room. It's quite an experience.
Understood. So in the last Game and Gadget podcast, we're actually ironically talking about the state of iPadOS and how after myself getting an iPad Pro, after the last iPad I had before that was iPad 3. So we're going back a number of years. And in terms of the actual operating system, not much had really happened to make it feel more like a computer-like device. And maybe it was a bit of optimism. Maybe some of it was Apple marketing pushing the boundaries just that bit too far. But certainly iPadOS 15 didn't quite hit the target for me. There was always limitations which I kept bumping into. Certainly compared to anything like a laptop. And I was being forgiving, but even so, it was a little bit frustrating at times. However, then literally probably a couple of weeks after that podcast, I can't claim any credit for it, obviously, Apple then announced iPadOS 16. And in this one, they announced something, I think, fairly huge, something called Stage Manager, which basically allows you to have almost a window-like interface. So I can have one app over here. I can have an app on the other side. So before, the idea of iPad multitasking was there's a few dots at the top of the screen. You'd select that, and it would give you options. Do you want to have a side-by-side view? You could maybe adjust that a little bit, but it was very rigid. You either had it half-half or 1/3 and then 2/3, and very little beyond that. There was some other options available, like you could have it slide in and be over the top of other apps, but I didn't find that actually that useful. But then this Stage Manager came along, and it was really ropey in the first public beta, but now the second beta has just been released. Oh my word, it's actually quite a bit better. You can have apps overlapping other apps if you need to just switch between two in a view. And then the Stage Manager thing you've got on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got 4 almost like workspaces to select from. So one may have Twitter in, along with your notepads, and then the next one may have another couple of windows. It's still very Apple-like in sense of the windows are very fixed to the width and height they're going to be. You can't customize it like you would on Mac OS or Windows or Linux where you want it. Oh, just that pixel in. You can't do that. It's all pretty defined that you can have a window this big, You can have a window this little bit smaller, maybe a bit bigger. Anything in between? No, forget that. You can't do that. That's a little bit out of scope for what they're doing. But, compared to what we had before, this does feel like something that's going to be a lot more practical and usable and far more like, without it actually being a laptop, without it actually copying Mac OS, it feels like something that's going to be better for multitasking and just keeping a few more apps in view.
Does it actually help you do anything, though?
It's a beta, so I haven't really overloaded it yet. But I've been putting a couple of apps next to each other, and the main thing also is the TV out, which used to just literally mirror what you had on your iPad screen, now is a proper extended display with, again, this same Stage Manager interface if you want it. And you can turn it on and off. If you don't like it, you just turn it off.
It's M chip only, isn't it? So it's not going to work on mine.
Correct. So it's M1 and above, although there's no above just yet, but I'm sure the next iPad Pro is probably going to be announced in the next 2 to 3 months.
I assume will be. So, right, so I need a new iPad.
Well,
if I want to do this. See, this time last year, I was thinking it'd be good to get a new iPad, and there's a new one coming, and it's going to be great, and it's and that'll be it. It'll last me for years and years, because the glory days of iPad 2, I mean, that thing lasted for years, like 5 or 6 years, didn't it? You didn't need to get another one. iPad 2 was brilliant.
Yeah.
So then I thought last year I'll get a new iPad and a new iPad Air, and it'll be great for years and years. And now, all the new stuff is on the M chip. So I still need to think about getting a Pro if I want to see the new stuff. I can't believe it.
Well, for your personal use case, though, do you need the new stuff rather than having to use the new stuff?
Does anybody need it?
I kind of want to use it. I don't want to take my laptop if I can avoid it. I'd sooner just take my iPad. So if I can get 75% of the way there, that would make me happy.
Yeah. See, I'm not sure. See, the app is meant to be. Maybe they've gone too far, and actually they should simplify it. So like it's just one app in the whole screen. That would be good, wouldn't it?
You've got that option. You just don't turn Stage Manager on. You literally from the control panel have to swipe down and turn it on.
They should simplify it. It's got to make it less like a Mac. That would be the way to go.
You're going to take away the keyboard and the mouse and the touch, the stylus, aren't you? We're going to be back to Steve Jobs' era of iPad.
iPad 1, it was brilliant. It was about an inch thick as well. It was about
the iPad 1, the original one, was really chunky compared to the iPad 2.
Yeah.
I mean, those were the days when you saw real rapid development. iPad 1, it was a tablet, beautiful tablet, but it certainly wasn't perfect. You could tell it got some thickness and weight to it. Then iPad 2 came along, and as you say, it was really thin.
That was a great machine.
It really was at the time. And then iPad 3 followed that, and that's when the Retina display came in for the iPad. It was just a bit too slow and couldn't really power the thing. But anyway, it had Retina display. And then 7 months later, as I mentioned in the last podcast, they released the iPad 4. And of course, James brought the iPad 3. But anyway, twice as fast a processor. And it's probably just to cope with the fact of the Retina display just taking too much of a toll.
I told you the story of how we got an iPad 1. I must have done.
I don't think so. Not the one.
We had to get one. You see, we had to put a Steel Sky on it or something like that. Apple were pushing us to do it, and of course they didn't, and they were like on the phone the next day, like Steve Jobs did his thing and said iPad, and everyone was like, wow, this is ace. And the next day, literally Apple UK were on the phone to us saying, you need to get your game onto this like next week. So we said, all right, send us an iPad. And they were like, well, we don't have any. We're Apple, but we didn't even know about this until we saw it on the telly like you did last night. But we need a version like in a week or two. So we had to get one. We had to find someone. I think it's Charles's cousin or something. He remembered he had a distant cousin in San Francisco. So we got this cousin to go and queue up and stuff in San Francisco. Get one of these iPad 1s, FedEx it to the UK. Where Charles got his greasy hands on it, and then I had to go over to Charles's house and pry the thing off him and take it home and set it up and do some work on it. But that night it was great. That night I went to the pub and I thought, oh, I'll show the guys the new iPad and just casually bring it along. So I thought I'm going to get robbed or something if I walk through York carrying an iPad. So I put it in a jiffy bag, which was the perfect disguise, and got to the pub and got the thing out and started showing everybody. And pretty soon there was like a gaggle of people, random people from around the pub going, "Is that an iPad? Is that an iPad?"
Wow,
it was fantastic. If we'd had a puppy or something or a kitten and put it on the table, we'd have had a similar sized crowd of people. It was great. I mean, there was a very short window where that would work, like 2 weeks or something. But the first iPad in York was quite a spectacle. Heady days.
Yeah, and of course, when you say Still Sky, that's beneath a Still Sky, which was released by Revolution Software, and you were hoping to do an iOS port at the time. So how did the iOS port of Beneath a Still Sky come about, really? Where was the starting point for that?
Well, they actually, I mean, Apple UK dev relations people rang us up long before Steel Sky, like 6 months or so, and I think we were busy on something like I think it was the director's cut for the Nintendo machines for Ubisoft. So we were very busy with that. They said, "Can we come and see you? And the idea that Apple would ring you up and offer to come and see you to sell you on some hardware was, a pretty remarkable thing, to be honest, and certainly doesn't happen now. But eventually they came up and told us all this stuff about it, and this is the iPhone, of course, and said the market, how big the market was and how much money you'll make and all these things, and they were, and to be fair, they were both Broken Sword fans. These two, Dave Currell and Paul Burford, that came to see us, and we said, okay, well, we'll get into it. We were a little bit busy at the moment, but then when we came to do it, we had a little bit of time, and we kind of looked at Steel Sky as being a simpler thing, and the screen resolution was exactly right for the iPhone and all this kind of stuff. So we decided to go with Steel Sky first, and it wasn't too bad. We did it and got it working in 3 or 4 months and put it out, and it did pretty great. I mean, I remember when we announced it on Twitter, I'd never seen so many retweets. It was momentous. It's a long time ago now, isn't it? 2008 or something.
A long time ago.
Time flies, doesn't it?
Well, someone told me today that Spice Girls Wannabe is 25 years old.
No way.
I was like, really? And
probably is. Yeah.
I should probably Google it to make sure, but I believe him. 25 years.
Yeah, I guess it was mid-90s, wasn't it, that stuff?
The beauty of 90s cheese.
They were quite good.
But it was good cheese at the time.
They wrote good pop songs, and that was the thing.
Oh, they did. I think, unfortunately, sorry, Spice Girls, I'm sure they're not watching, but regardless, I think some of it's dated quite badly compared to some other music of the time. But, I was well within that era, and I don't mind admitting, I was a massive Spice Girls fan at the time.
Yeah.
So, I was one of those mental ones to buy an album. But I haven't listened to their music in years and years and years, so I couldn't help but laugh when, in a sort of pleasing, ironic way, that there's a big bit of a craze going on right now, particularly with music services like Apple Music, where they're wanting as much music as possible to be in Dolby Atmos. So you'll get proper surround music, which we haven't seen in the consumer space properly or successfully for a long time. It never really took off. There's been DVD audio, there's been Super Audio CD that could support 5.1 music, but it may be Dolby Atmos because it's compatible with any set of headphones for music. That you still need a phone with Dolby Atmos compatibility, but if you ignore that for the minute, Apple's fully behind it. And one of the albums it was done for Dolby Atmos was Spice Girls, the very first album. I thought, I've got to listen to this at some point just to hear how's it going to use all the 5 channels and the height speakers. And in theory, it can be more than 5 channels, and it's not really channel specific. It's 360-degree audio. But regardless, it did make me chuckle when, of all the albums of history, the Spice Girls album 1 is there in Dolby Atmos.
There's probably a reason for that. It's probably something to do with demographics and age groups and stuff.
Maybe they're just... it'd be the record companies deciding this, so they must be thinking, let's take something from each genre, each era.
Probably, yeah.
But it does seem to be getting some momentum.
There's probably a Dire Straits album on there as well, I bet.
I have never checked. I will have a look for you if you remind me. But
Elton
John was quite a recent one. Elton John was one recently that's been added. Loads of songs in Dolby Atmos. And actually, it sounds really good. There's other mixes that aren't so good. So there was a Bryan Adams album I was listening to not that long ago, and there was just some odd choices in where the vocals were sat and things like that. So it's like anything. If the mix of that original source isn't right, and it's got to reflect, and this is the difficulty, anything like this, it's got to kind of represent that original stereo track. But
isn't it too late?
Sorry?
Isn't it too late? Doesn't it have to be recorded in a special way to get the most out of it?
Nope.
Like surround speakers or something? Surround microphones?
Nope.
No?
Even Beatles are in Dolby Atmos. And the effect may be more subtle because of the recording equipment limitations at the time.
Mm.
But they've still got enough track information to at least expand the sound, which is really crazy because some of those tracks would have been mono originally released.
Well,
and then there would have been like a stereo version, and now there's a Atmos version. But certainly the further you go back, the more difficult it is to get individual recordings of the mix. But from what I've seen, like Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, even on... It wasn't DVD audio. No, it was DVD audio. But it was also DTS. What was their format? DTS HD, I think it was. But it was in 96 kilohertz, 24-bit. And I've got the disc somewhere lurking around. But that was the 5.1 track. And it was like, Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia, Mamma Mia, with the speakers going around. Now, if they'd had it full separated tracks, I'm sure they could have split the harmony really well across the channels, but they're not. It's a little bit more bouncing from channel to channel, so a little less exciting. But it was a novelty, and this was years ago, and now that's available in Dolby Atmos. But I think it sounds pretty much like the original track I heard years ago, so I don't think much has been done with it. But certainly, if you there's some actually YouTube videos I was watching also this week, in fact, and it was this person who's a vocal coach breaking down Michael Jackson tracks, and somehow he'd got the source recordings with the individual tracks on, so he could go in and literally mute everything else and just listen to the raw sound of Michael Jackson. Now you think, well, why would you want to do that? But the point was, there was about, there's possibly 50 different tracks for one of his songs from 30 odd years ago. And to hear Michael Jackson in a raw format, you could really, without any of this modern pitch correction stuff and auto-tune, where he wasn't quite pitch perfect, once it was mixed with everything else, it added to the personality of the track. And also, there was quite a bit where you could hear him sort of stomping his feet as he was getting into his groove and clicking his fingers and all his woohoo and all that business. He was just fascinating just to hear that bit soloed from everything else. But it did also show that, if you don't go too far back, there's still a whole catalogue of music where there's a lot of track information where they can separate it and, put it in a 360-degree world quite successfully. So I'm hoping some Michael Jackson goes Dolby Atmos, if there isn't already, because I haven't spotted any yet.
And we get to buy all our music again.
Well, if you're on a streaming service, you don't. Apple Music, what is it, £10 a month, and it's Dolby Atmos.
I'm a Spotify man myself, but
you're still stuck on that good old Dog Vorbis format.
Yeah. Actually, I read. I'd forgotten about Dolby Atmos, but I read a review of a Sonos soundbar thing that supported it, and it sounded quite difficult to actually make it work. You know, like what you connect it to feed the data back into it, and it sounded like a faff to me. So I was kind of, I'll forget about this for a while.
Yeah, I was actually talking to someone about this recently. If you've got a sound bar, you'd have to have. I don't think there's that many TVs that actually support the signal as such to actually be able to send it to something else as an Atmos.
I think
so.
you're
Usually better getting like a Google TV or Amazon stick or something like that that shows it's got Atmos support. That's your quickest way in. If you have a soundbar with Atmos,
which I don't, so we'll just wait and see what happens with all that.
And if you wanted, and this is where it gets annoying, if you want the Dolby Atmos for Apple Music, you probably need the Apple TV to fully get all the benefits of that.
Presumably, though, if you have Apple Music on your Mac and you have Apple headphones, then it's just going to work, isn't it?
I think the Mac itself needs to be Dolby Atmos. It needs to advertise it's got Dolby Atmos compatibility. I don't think it's the case. Like my Android phone, there's other Android phones that don't have this Dolby Atmos.
Isn't it just codecs and software?
I think they have to pay a license, so not everything has it, and that's the problem.
Okay.
So Dolby makes the money off per device sold. Probably they get a little bit thrown in to have this as part of it. So it's not a matter I can plug my headphones into any Android device and I can get Atmos. It has to be specifically Atmos certified. So I've seen newer Macs that say they're Atmos. So even coming out the speakers, it will give you an Atmos effect, shall we say. And my iPad Pro, it's Dolby Atmos. And it sounds pretty darn good because it's got the 4 speakers in it. And, you know, if you sit yourself directly in front of it, it sounds pretty good. But it's always better with the headphones. Unless you have the full Dolby sort of Atmos surround setup going on as well. But yeah, it's not a matter of... we've just had a question. I don't think there's a way to get Apple Music Atmos through an Atmos amp, Apple TV, or a Mac with Dolby Atmos certification, and then maybe you could HDMI that into an amp.
Surely a Mac is a Mac.
A Mac is a Mac. Yeah, but it's got HDMI out, so as long as it passes through the signal.
Yeah.
So probably your new MacBook Pro supports Dolby Atmos.
You would hope so, wouldn't you?
It's worth double checking, and then you can throw in some headphones.
Well, I've got Apple. I've got expensive Sony M4s, and I've got Apple iPod latest ones. So you'd think something would work, wouldn't you?
Oh, more reason to look at Apple Music, maybe. Can we pull you away from Spotify? I don't know, but Spotify seems to be doing okay, even though they haven't gone lossless yet. February, what was it? 2021. They promised lossless.
I like Spotify.
And here we are, 2nd of August, still waiting for the darn thing.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's impressive, though, in the audio arena, and that is the whatever it is, the new iPod things that I've got. I mean, the spatial thing. So if I listen to, like, if I'm watching the snooker or something that I'm working, then I have I feed it through the Sky app on my iPad, which is sat to the left of me, and I feed it through into the speaker, into the headphone thing, the iPod things, you know, the white things, and it, because it's spatial, the sound is coming from the iPod, the iPad to my left, and I'm going. You can't tell if you've got the things in or not. It's so clever because it's directional. So I'm taking them off and going, nope, it's definitely coming out, and putting them back on, and it sounds just as if it's coming. And then you turn it in your head, and the sound is changing.
Oh, that's cool.
It's really good. Like, you cannot tell that you've got them on because it's every time you move it's coming from a place, you know.
Right. I didn't realize it worked with stereo sources as well. Then
it's amazing. It just fools you. You can't. You have to do a double take to check that you're actually, the thing is actually doing what you think it's doing. You know, it's so effective.
Have you ever
It's
had a
weird.
trial of Apple Music?
No.
There must be a month trial you can just sign up to, just to try Atmos for a month. Because I've got some Sony headphones. And unfortunately, Apple, being Apple, it has to be one of the latest Apple headphones, earphones, etc. for the turning your head thing to track and have that audio awareness. So I'll get 360 sound through my Sony headphones, which is great. But, if I turn my head, the sound will just turn with me, where what you're saying is if there's someone directly speaking directly ahead, if you turn your head, that sound is going to shift as you turn.
Yeah.
With my headphones, it's just rigid, which is fine. I still get Dolby Atmos and it's great, but yeah, it gives you an extra dimension.
Well, I'm not sure you want the spatial thing on music anyway, but it's quite okay for like a TV type thing, I think, because it looks like it's matching the display. It's matching where the picture is. But for just music, I don't think you need it. I mean, why does it need to be coming from somewhere? It just wants to be around your head, doesn't it? So I don't think you actually want it for music. But that's different from Atmos. I mean, Atmos is just a super stereo, isn't it? Which makes perfect sense. But you don't need to link it to a point in the room that you're in as such.
No, this is true. But certainly, a free trial, give it a go. But like I say, some mixers are better than others. I'd recommend, if you like Elton John in any way, shape or form, his mixers seem very good. If you like Bryan Adams, maybe not so good. It depends, I think, and this is actually what the DVD audio fell into the trap of. I had about several discs in this format, and they couldn't decide, even on the same album, whether the lead vocal, whoever it was, so let's say I've got the Cause in blue on DVD audio. Does Andrea Corr on this track come out the center speaker, and then on the next track come out of both left and right speakers and ignore the center channel? And literally on the same album, they could not decide. So the first album the first track on the album was like left and right channels only for the vocal of Andrea Corr. And then the next one would be the center exclusively. It's like, this is confusing. And I think actually the best ones are where it can mimic stereo a bit better and put the lead vocal in the left and right channels. It's a little bit more familiar. They can still use the center and the rears for other things, whether it's like, even Dolby Surround, if you go back even further in years, when it was analog, and from that 2 channels, Dolby would extrapolate from the frequencies where it thinks what should be in what channel, particularly for the rear. And it would give you, like, usually when there was like the backing singers kicking in, that would predominantly come out the rear channels, which was quite nice for music, even though it wasn't channel specific. And Dolby Atmos needs to have some of that, but just play around with the capabilities it's got, which it would never have had back then. But yeah, please, for goodness sake, if you've got a lead singer, left and right channel, don't go with the center, and particularly don't keep switching on the same blinking album.
Nothing worse.
I know. In the grand scheme of things of life, with everything that's going on, particularly right now, it sounds like a rather trivial thing. This is, if you think that Dolby Atmos has got some legs and some life in it, and unlike other, beyond stereo formats that have come and gone very quickly, Dolby Atmos actually seems to have a chance of sticking around. So in 30 years, if we're listening back to these same tracks, so we're going to think, oh my God, it's out the center channel again. Why isn't it like all the other stuff? It's going to be like that.
It's thin under the wedge, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm showing my age onto now, Tony. I'm becoming that grumpy old man.
Just step forward 20 years. It's the end of civilization, and we can trace it all back to.
We'll trace it all back to bad Dolby Atmos mixers. Yeah, absolutely.
Microphone placement.
So, in terms of our last chat, tell me about your book, where we're at now. So, The History of Revolution Software, Tony is writing about it for the people who haven't seen this before. But where we're up to right now, because you must be getting close to.
Well, I don't know what I said last time, a couple of months ago, but I probably said it's nearly finished, and now it really is nearly finished.
Okay.
I mean, myself and Martin Mulrooney have done a lot of work on the edit. I mean, I as I probably said, I kind of imagine you write the thing, you fix the spelling mistakes and a bit of grammar, and Bob's your uncle. You're done. That's actually not the case, and I now understand all this talk about first drafts that proper authors talk about. Your first draft is really not your final draft in any sense of the word. So I mean, we and I have both added a lot to this and tweaked it around and done a lot of work to it. Charles has been reading it and making a lot of comments, but he's been very Charles-like and has gone very slowly and disappeared for blocks of time. So we've had to harass Charles to get him to do his bit. Now he's nearly finished. Man. Yeah. I mean, it's a book. Half the book is about how games are late and why they might be late. And the irony that the whole thing has flooded out and affected the book in the same ways is not lost on me. But it's quite funny, really, because some of the reasons are the same. Underestimating how long things will take and different people's input and all the rest of it. But Charles has nearly finished it now. In fact, he might finish it even tonight or tomorrow. So that'll be a big milestone. And I'm now putting it into InDesign, which is an Adobe product, which is what you lay the thing out. You have it in a word processor, Pages or Google Docs it's in at the moment, and you can't just send that to the printers. You have to format it properly. So Adobe InDesign is the package they all use, and you can put your page layouts and your photographs, and because it's going to have lots and lots and lots of pictures, this book, probably 150 pictures of things. So it's as much a picture book as it is 340 pages of text. So it's going to be a big thing, and it has to be laid out properly. And InDesign is what you do, and when you've done that, you can send it to the printers, and then you're in a whole other world of pain. Finding a printer and choosing the paper and choosing the print type and the ink type and the binding type and how you do the cover for the hardback, and there's so much stuff, and it's really expensive as well. It turns out really, really expensive to print these things. So it's all a big eye opener, but
I bet you have to be bold, don't you? Because I bet if you order 500, it's more per book. If you order 1,000, it's a little less per book.
Well, it seems to be 1,000. What I'm looking at the moment, 1,000 costs a hell of a lot, and then another 1,000 is a bit less on that second 1,000. It seems to be quite a common theme. But I don't know how many I'm going to actually do on the Kickstarter. It might be 300, it might be 3,000. Who knows? But I have to understand what it will cost either way. But it's going to be a super high quality thing, as we always did the most expensive thing at Revolution, and this book is the same. It needs to be the best it can be. So it'll be the kind of price that these things go for on Kickstarter. Low run, high quality things, but it'll be a nice thing when it's done. So potentially it could go. And I'm going to get some test copies, like 10 or something, and they're phenomenally expensive as well. But I'm gonna that could even be next week if I can find a printer. I might even be sending it off for its initial run.
Wow.
Then make a Kickstarter video and do a Kickstarter, I guess. So it could be the next few weeks, yeah.
So who's helping with the Kickstarter stuff? Is any sort of people who've done this before? It said, "Oh, Tony, I can give you some advice or some help," or you're literally going in and first time and seeing what can be done?
Well, I obviously we did a Kickstarter Revolution, so
that's true.
It's 10 years ago. Yeah, it's 10 years ago, but I don't think all that much has changed actually as far as Kickstarter itself is concerned.
No Pebble watches.
Yeah. There's been a lot of disasters, hasn't there? But Kickstarter seems to be quite good for books, so that's something in our favour. It seems to be the world of books on Kickstarter is doing very well. Games, not so much for one reason or another, and big bits of hardware not so well either. But books seem to do well, so that's a good thing. But yeah, need to make a video. How to do the video? That's a good question. I don't want to do a standard corporate type, here's me sitting talking about my book in a very earnest way. I don't quite see myself doing that. So something kind of weird and funny, maybe.
Tony blue screen. Here we go again.
Yeah. I mean, Revolutions one was all green screen. It was quite funny, really, all the stuff. Do you remember it? Charles talking to George and Nico and stuff. But it was quite clever, actually. But it was a lot of work. I mean, what we're going to do won't be as clever as that, but we'll see. It'll be very, very low budget, but that's all right.
Make sure you chuck a floppy disk at the end.
Yeah, well, I probably talked about this, didn't I? The central theme bit is going to be throwing the discs to each other, and I don't know. Maybe it'll be some sort of. You see, what I found recently was a load of footage that I took of the Revolution Kickstarter. So I've got lots of videos of us all making that original Kickstarter. Mucking around in the studio and in front of the green screen and all the rest of it, and some other stuff from when we did update videos for the Britain Sword 5 Kickstarter in the office. Quite often I was stood behind the scenes filming it all on an iPhone. So I've got all that footage, and it's actually quite funny and interesting, some of it. So I thought I might get some people like Dave, and probably not Charles because he's super busy, but maybe Martin and maybe even Stevens if he's around and up for it. And we're going to film this disc chucking thing, so that'll be like the proper thing that goes on in there. But then I might one thing we could do is take a load of footage of that being made. Okay, so us making the Kickstarter disc chucking thing, but film it one step removed, and then splice that stuff together with that original Kickstarter stuff that I've got. So it's stuff from 10 years ago, and it's stuff from now, and people talking about stuff, and maybe it'll be a sort of a crazy mini documentary type thing. I don't know, something like that.
It sounds lots of fun, if nothing else.
I watched. There's a David Lynch documentary. I can't remember what it's called now. David Lynch, the art of life, artist's life, something like that. It's really interesting, and I mean, you don't need to be a David Lynch fan, but if you are, then it's something you absolutely have to watch. I mean, it's just him mucking around in his studio, drawing things and making things and talking about crazy stuff, and also talking about his story, how he got started, what he did, and how the first films were made. And it's super interesting, but it's just someone's turned up and switched a camera on, so I got some of my idea from that. So that's the thinking. Who knows? It'll be a right mess, but that'll be its charm,
Well, I've been lucky enough to have a fairly early draft of the book. It's probably going to be fairly bit different by the time I get to the final version, because I'm not sure what draft version that was, but it must have been quite early on.
Yeah, you're way back now.
I'm way back. But, I've been really enjoying it, and I hope to finish it soon. I've been that busy, which is one of the reasons we've not had a recording for the Game and Gadget podcast. But, I'll complete it, and then I'll get the joy of reading it all over again in its final form. In terms of assets, then, have you had much trouble getting them all together, or you had quite a few to hand?
Assets? Well, I mean, I keep lots of photos, so it's just photos. I mean, there are some photos from the early 90s of Revolution stuff. There's very little around the Broken. I mean, obviously, Broken Sword 1 is of particular interest to a lot of people, and there's very little photography from that period, unfortunately. Some, but not huge amounts, because people didn't have camera phones back then, so there was very little. Unless you came in with a big camera and started shooting it, people would say, "What the hell are you doing?" It's not a normal thing like it is now. I mean, if I go to a meeting now, I take photographs of people, and they're kind of like why are you doing that? You know, why are you taking photos? It's just us lot talking about some design or something, you know. But I'm always thinking, you know, but I know that in 20 years' time, we'll look at these photos and it'll be like, oh yeah, that was really interesting. I remember that now. So always that's the moral, always take lots of photos if you can, no matter how trivial the thing is that you're doing. And I wish there was more of early revolution, but what there is gold dust. And I mean, I've got it all on an archive, so I'll stick it in the book, you know.
So have these been a lot of photos where it's been like a physical photo and you've had to scan them all in?
Some are scans, yeah. There's a few scans from the 90s. There's a few that have had to be scanned, yeah. And documentation and stuff like that.
I came on the other side of this scenario in the sense of, with smartphones, the cameras on them are pretty fantastic, even on mid-range phones. They're, compared to what we were using years ago, even as a standalone device. If you exclude the zoom factor for a minute, you know, it's for just a quick point and shoot and get a photo, it's great. Yeah. But I was at a party on Saturday. It was somebody's 100th birthday, which is pretty spectacular. She's the only person I know who's reached 100. So well done to her. But at the event, there was somebody going around taking photos with their smartphone. And it got to me and my wife. And, you know, I started to pose and put my arm around my wife. But she took a photo before I'd even got to that point. And they've just put on Facebook last night of all the photos of everybody there, and there's some nice ones, and like, yay, here's me with the 100-year-old and all that. And then there's me and my wife. My wife looks lovely, and there's me going. And it's not, basically, folks, if you listen to the audio version, it's not a pleasing photo. I was quite surprised. And of course, this is on Facebook now for posterity. If I had the choice, I would have preferred me, not with my mouth wide open, with my now COVID large stomach sticking out, desperate to lose some weight. And there it is in full display. But never mind. What can you do? What can you do?
I'll search for that and see if I can find it.
You won't. You won't. I'm not tagged, thankfully, so it will be very difficult. And if I had been tagged, I'd have probably been a bit naughty and untagged myself. But yeah, what can you do? Smartphones, there's photos and indeed videos being taken everywhere. And that's not, of course, I mean, even walking around the estate where I live, there's like tons of CCTVs, and they're all the smart ones. If it's not Google, it's probably the Amazon selection. If it's not the Amazon selection, it'll be ones that's probably streaming it to a cloud storage solution. And it just makes you wonder, how much are we being captured now?
You can't complain. You've got one on your doorbell, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I've got a few cameras myself. I can't complain, but it is odd just walking around and thinking, do you know, if I walked down here doing anything up to no good, they'd be able to track every step of my route if they went to each house and asked for information.
Yeah.
Because it's just like everywhere you go, there's a camera. And we used to complain that, you know, the councils would be putting cameras everywhere, particularly in towns. But now, because of the smart home devices, it's, you know, it's on the outside of the house, it's on the doorbell. I mean, it's good for security. But, you know, if you're a bit privacy conscious and you don't want all this stored somewhere, it's going to be difficult.
It's just the flip side. You need to, you know, the good side and the bad side are linked together, and that's just the way it'll be now. I can't see it ever changing. There's never going to be less, is there?
Well, maybe it will change. Maybe we'll just all live in the countryside and with no electricity. And we'll be sat there reading your book because it won't require any of these modern technologies.
Exactly. You can read it sat outside in the sunlight. Because
it's only going to be a hard copy, isn't it? There's not going to be like a digital version, as far as you're aware.
Yes, I'm not planning a digital version. No.
So there you go. Hard copy.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
You have to read it the real way.
I love technology, but I still like to. I've had quite a few books where I get the physical copy, and even if they've sent, you know, you buy the hard copy, they will send you the digital version as part of that. I'm always reading the hard copy. Always. There's just something nice about holding the book and turning the page.
I've gone back. I mean, I was reading stuff on Kindle and invariably on an iPad or an iPhone or something. But then I started to think, well, I'm kind of, and I read late at night. I just don't want to look at the screen anymore. I want to look at not the screen, because I've walked away from the computer to stop looking at screens. So, the idea of pulling your phone out and starting to read a book, it's not what I want to do. So I'm quite happily going back to paper. It went too far and stepped back a little bit.
Well, my pursuit for the next couple of weeks is, again, in the last podcast, I was talking about how I'd not really had much experience with Amigas. I'd never actually owned one myself personally. So I'm going to convert my Raspberry Pi 4 to an Amiga emulator. I'm going to have some fun with that. And I've also missed the 8-bit days, so I think I'm going to try some Commodore 64, and in particular, and I used to own one of these many years ago, an Atari 65 XE, which was a really nice 8-bit computer with the cassette tapes. And this music wasn't quite as good as the SID chip from the Commodore 64, but it was still a really nice 8-bit machine, and I had a lot of fun with it, and I regret getting rid of it now. But that's life, isn't it? But what would I plug it into now? Unless you had one of the original monitors, and they're getting harder and harder to come by.
Yeah. But Atari, I mean, what a great name that is. It's a shame it's not doing much at the moment. I mean, it was such a strong name, isn't it? You think Atari.
It's so been used for that many things that we wouldn't strictly call Atari over recent years.
Around, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of lost its edge. It's a shame. It really is a shame, because that Atari brand was something special.
It was, wasn't it? I mean, it goes back so far. I mean, it was like 70s. I mean, Atari making video games was a very small thing in California, wasn't it? I mean, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, they worked there, didn't they, for a bit, until they got thrown out. It was at the genesis of a lot of things, was Atari.
Well, again, one of the ones I owned was the Atari 2600, and I think that'd be my first proper console where you could plug in additional games. It wasn't like a box and it had your predefined games and that was it. I mean, before that I would have had Pong, which was basically Pong or tennis Pong or football Pong. It was Pong with some variants. But then the Atari 2600 came out and it had the cartridges, and that was great. And it all started, I think it was the Atari that probably inspired all my game interest.
Yeah. And good stuff.
Indeed.
And the Commodore, obviously 64 was a great machine as well.
I didn't have the bread bin version, which was like the original case. I had I think it was the compact, the 64C. And it was ironically seemed bigger. It had a bigger back to it. But it was, again, great 8-bit computer. And I got mine just around the time where when you could buy like magazines and it had a cassette with full games on it, and it had like 5 full games on it. Didn't have to buy any games. It was ridiculous. It's like, I'll just get the next magazine. There's 5 games for me to try. There's another magazine of a different brand, different 5 games. Thank you very much. I'll buy that. That's very good.
Yeah. Zap 64.
Yeah, there was
great.
There was loads back in the day. And that's something else we don't get now, because if you want to, I mean, I would buy an Xbox magazine to get the demo disc. Now, you just download the demo, if there's a demo at all, because that seems to be also a thing that's not that prevalent anymore, to actually get a demo of a game before the actual release of the thing.
You just get whatever it's called, early access and all those sorts of things, don't you?
Exactly, and that's probably easier for them to orchestrate, because you hear quite a few things in the gaming news where the demos had extra content that shouldn't have been in, and they've looked at the source files and they've been able to work out more the plot and unlock some more of the game. And
yeah, well, usually that's what it would be. We did a Beneath Steel Sky demo, and it came on one floppy, and someone would say, "Oh, we need a demo for feature publishing. Can you do it for tomorrow or for Friday?" And you'd go, "Well, you've got the real game, so you're just going to nobble it somehow so that it doesn't go past a certain point, and chop any extra data away that you can get away with and slap it on a floppy disk, and that's the end of it, But it was always a very quick job. It was always, oh no, we need a demo, but this is the worst possible time for a demo because we're trying to finish the game. We're probably in the middle of crunch trying to actually finish the game. Someone's asking for a demo, so you're going to try and do it in the least amount of time possible, which is basically put it in some, if demo, then end it here. Probably quite easy to hack out.
It boggles my mind to think how stressful that must have been at that time with, they call it developer crunch, don't they? Where basically you get into that point where it needs to release for a particular time, and that's where the hours really mount up, and you've just got to get it done. And if you factor in demos as well, and like you've just described, the risk of having something in there that may reveal something else. Crazy.
One way or another, yeah. And the other problem was that the magazines were on 6 weeks lead time, so you were very much probably alpha or something like that. You might be 2 months off the game coming out, but you need that demo now to be on a magazine at the same time as because you don't want to demo on the front of a meager format that can't be translated into someone saying, oh, I like this, I'll go out to WH Smith's and buy it. If they've got the demo in their hands but they can't go out and buy the game, then the whole thing's gone horribly wrong. So you have to try and time it perfectly, but with the lead time on the magazines, that's actually quite difficult to do. But one way or another, you're always making a demo out of an unfinished game, which is risky in itself, because if it's got bugs in it or it's a bit ropey, and these things always tended to be. Broken Sword and Steel Sky, they were always ropey until two weeks before they were finished. Just when it all snapped into focus, with everything being perfect. A month out, these games were terrible. So, you were never making a demo at an optimal time.
I can imagine. And they could really be make or break, because I remember, again, you get your Xbox demo disc or whatever it was at the time, and you play it, and you think, oh, I'm really looking forward to this, and you play it for a bit, and you think, this is terrible. This is not what I expected at all. And then that would stop you buying the full game. Now, maybe when the full game came out, they fixed all those problems. Maybe it ran better. Maybe the controls were better. Go on, Tony.
It probably would. Well, you're going to end the demo. You're going to say, "Thank you for playing our demo," and then you kind of want to put on the next line, "The real game will be better than this." It's like, but you had the same problem with exclusive reviews, and that was another thing. There'd always be a magazine that had an exclusive, that had a review an hour earlier than anybody else, and you would sorry, not an hour, a month, an edition earlier than other magazines, so that you were making them that review copy way in advance of the game being finished, and that was dicing with death. That's one good thing about the digital age, of course. It's more instant. You don't have this huge long lead time that the print magazines had.
This is true. And the salvation of a day one patch.
Yeah, it's close cousin.
Right. Well, 56 minutes in, I think we'll call this a day for Game and Gadget podcast number 19. Thank you for those who joined us on the live stream and for your comments and questions. So, Stiff Peaks, I'm looking at you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And that's it from this Game and Gadget podcast. See you next time.